Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome, everybody. It is time for the Books That Make You show, and I'm your host, Desiree Duffy. And today we're talking about books that make you go from burnout to a leader who thrives. Once you realize that you need to stop playing by the old rules and instead use the new playbook for women at work. Women, we are natural leaders, but let's face it, we get burnt out. And though we've been playing by the rules, we still aren't achieving the leadership roles that we sometimes deserve. Now, with Randi Braun as their coach, they stand on the precipice of something major. Women leaders everywhere are going to enjoy this groundbreaking book. Now, Randi is a sought-after thought leader. She is a speaker, and she is the author of the women's leadership book called Something Major, the New Playbook for Women at Work from New Degree Press. Randi's book is brimming with anecdotal stories as well as facts, figures. She is changing women's lives, one play at a time. And the best part, she's doing it in 3-inch pink pumps. Randi, hello. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Desiree. Love my pumps and love my wine sweatshirt as well. It's a very fun accessory.
You've got it going on. I love that combination. And I am going to ask you about those pink pumps. But first, let's set the stage and talk about the fact that women are burnt out. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I started to write this book, in the throes of what I think has been the biggest crisis for women leaders ever. And that has been what we've gone through the last few years. And it's not just working moms, it's women everywhere. We have women who are leaving the workforce in record numbers. Something's broken. We've been playing by these old rules and they're clearly not working. So I saw it after, like you just mentioned in your intro, to write a new playbook for women at work that I hope is going to allow us to thrive and actually enjoy our lives in the process.
Now, perfectionism seems like it's a big part of that. Women leaders are often addicted to perfectionism. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So this is the biggest thing about perfectionism that we don't talk about, Desiree, which is that research in the field of psychology overwhelmingly shows us that women are addicted to perfectionism. And there's a few reasons why. I'm going to share just two of them with you. One is that research shows us that perfectionism is an addictive cycle because it's one of these things where we go, we seek it, and when we don't get it, we actually just burrow deeper into feeling like, oh, I just need to be more perfect next time. So there's great research on that. The other big piece of academic research we need to start talking more about is this idea of the curse of the good girl. So, so many of us, Desiree, I don't know about you, but I certainly experienced this in my childhood. I was taught to be a good girl, get good grades. Those are things we're rewarded from, the research shows us, growing up, but they actually don't serve us in our professional lives. And so between those two things, we're just practicing these bad habits around perfectionism that keep us running around in circles instead of running towards our goals.
I'm going to add something in there. This reminds me of a time early in my career where me and a male coworker were both assigned to do a report, and I slaved over it. Everything had to be perfect. Every I, every T. You know how it goes. Perfect. All the instructions. I saw his, I saw mine, and I heard him getting all this praise, and I was just like, what happened? I was perfect. Do you see that disparity a lot too?
All the time. So there's a woman I interviewed in my book named Michelle. Today, she's a really successful lawyer. So as you know, Desiree, college does not pay for itself. And so Michelle, when her paid internship fell through in New York City, she had to scramble to get something. She got a job working at the Taco Bell off Route 46 in Parsippany, New Jersey. And the new girl in the Taco Bell, she was bottom of the totem pole. She got stuck on bathroom cleaning duty. And as she tells the story, that is just not a place that you want to be in a fast food restaurant. Well, she said no one had ever made that Taco Bell sparkle the way she did. And she thought by basically killing it and making that bathroom sparkle, she'd be quick to get promoted. Here's the problem, Desiree. She did such a good job cleaning that Taco Bell bathroom that for the rest of the summer, as new people came in, she got stuck on cleaning bathroom duty every single night. And I think that this is so common for so many of us in our corporate lives. We're so good at taking the notes. We're so good at ordering lunch or coordinating the baby shower gift that we get saddled with this amount of non-promotable work in our quest to be perfect or our quest to be an overachiever. And it's holding us back. It's not propelling us forward.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from women who are in assistant type roles where they're assisting, they're doing all of the work, but then they get trapped there because they do it all so well. What are you going to do?
And then the other thing that I'm seeing is I definitely see that in the junior and the middle management roles. But, Desiree worked with a lot of women who are in really senior leadership roles. And you'd be stunned how many of them are vice presidents who are still coordinating the office happy hour, or they're at the C-level and they are proofreading a deck as the COO that is going to the CEO. No. The CEO should be sharing that non-promotable work with people who are lower down the chain. And it's not that we can't give our all at work. Someone has to always go above and beyond. But when all of those somebodies are women, we run into an issue. And if I could just share one more piece of research, Desiree, there's research out of the University of Pittsburgh that women are 50% more likely to take on this kind of office housework, these non-promotable tasks. And women of color in particular are the most likely to get saddled with them. So it's not an issue about going above and beyond, but there is an issue when we see a clear gender breakdown in the workplace of where we're spending our time, because every minute that I'm taking meeting notes or coordinating the birthday party is a minute that I am not doing promotable work.
And underscoring all of this, one of the main points of your book is that women leaders are just not happy. And that all feeds into this is why they're not happy, because they're doing too much. They're overburdened, right?
Absolutely. I got a call, shortly before I started writing this book from a woman that I'll call Anna. And she just called me and she was like, I'm just not in the mood. I can't even remember the last time I was. And she was not talking about what you think she was talking about. I mean, she was talking about work. She had done everything right, for God's sakes, Desiree. She went to Harvard. And she had this incredible role at this huge global company that we all know. And she just couldn't figure out why she wasn't excited anymore. And she had a case of low work libido. And unfortunately, there's just no little blue pill for that. And I think that we're seeing that everywhere. We have the burnout crisis, which is where we started our conversation. But we also have women who are just low grade, dreadful, low grade, unhappy. And that hurts not just our quality of life, it hurts our longevity, it hurts our overall earning potential. And I know in my heart of hearts that we can do better. And that's why I wrote the new playbook, which is 10 core competencies that I want women to feel empowered to write new rules around in their life.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the old playbook versus the new playbook. Mm-hmm. I love that analogy, by the way, of just kind of breaking the rules. Can you talk about why this old system is broken? What's going on there?
Absolutely. So, in my corporate career, and for many of the women I've coached over the years, I heard a lot of the same rules, right? Which is get mentors and sponsors, take on more budget, take on more people, and be the best boss that you can. And don't get me wrong, Desiree, those are all phenomenal pieces of advice. I would not be here if I hadn't stretched myself in my corporate career, and if I hadn't had amazing mentors and sponsors along the way. But if you look at the trends of the old playbook, it's all about decentering us, our needs, our dreams. And it's all about centering other people, that other people are the ticket to our success. And what I really hope that women will feel empowered to do in this new playbook, and again, there's 10 different topics inside this book that I want women to write their new playbook on. What I hope the new playbook will help women do is feel more empowered to play by their own rules by putting themselves at the center of their work and their lives and getting really tactical and actionable about how to do it. Like, one of the things that really held me back, Desiree, was feeling so tethered to external validation because of that old playbook messaging I received around make sure other people like you, make sure you get mentors and sponsors. And it wasn't that those people weren't helpful, but it taught me to, in moments of uncertainty, turn up the volume on other people's voices and turn down the volume on mine, or when I listen to my own voice, to doubt it. And I'm just hoping that women who read this book will feel more empowered to crack the code on their self-doubt, own their message, and just really kill it. That's really what it's all about. Kill it without killing themselves, Oh,
yeah. I love that. I love some of the concepts in your book. And one of them is the idea that the old playbook is a looking glass and the new one is a prism. I just love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like, one of the things, Desiree, I tell people all the time when I come into offices, I do corporate workshops, I always tell people, listen, every single person in this room, even me and you right here in this interview, we're different learners, we're different leaders, we have a different origin story. That's something to be celebrated. And it's something that the old playbook was absolutely positively blind to. We had one very rigid set of rules, and it was like a looking glass. You picked it up and you saw one thing. What I really do hope, and it's why I write it in the book, so thanks for picking up on that, is that I hope that women will pick up this book more as a prism. The way that you look through a prism and your own unique view is refracted through it depending on where you're looking and how the light hits. Another way, Desiree, to think about it is that this book is not a prescription. It is not like a 10 tips to rock your career. It's a buffet. There's so much meat in this book, so many funny stories, but also so many great tips. And I hope that women will read at the end of each chapter. We have, anywhere from 4 to 6 tips on any given subject. And I hope that women will not try and do all 6 at one, but pick 1 or 2 per chapter that move the dial for them in their lives. That's what this is about. It's about you, not about me.
Yeah. And you do have a list of 16 forbidden things to say. And I'm going to get to that. But first, can we talk about men in leadership positions and the pay gap and all of that? Because after all this time, and I used to be the president of a women's organization, American Women in Radio and Television. And I remember 20 years ago, people saying, "Oh, it's over. Women and men, they're almost equal. You guys, you can stop now." But we can't stop, can we?
Totally. And you know what, Desiree? I'm so glad you brought this up because I have a huge issue with the patriarchy, but I do not have an issue with men. And that is something that I want to clarify right here. I am here in my life partly because of some of the incredible men in my corporate career and my personal life who supported me. And we live in an incredibly patriarchal society where this is one of the number one things that's my up at night issue when I'm a mother to a 6-year-old daughter is we are backsliding on so many key metrics. So we could talk about women, the data about women in leadership, but just to stay here on the pay gap, one of the most troubling things that has happened in the last few years is that the World Economic Forum has calculated that it has set back the forecast for closing the pay gap from 99 years, which was already like, please, I'm going to just pass out and die right now, to over 135 years. Desiree, that is the length of an entire generation. And I don't know about you, but I have hopes and dreams. I'm sure you have hopes and dreams. Our listeners have hopes and dreams. And my daughter has hopes and dreams that cannot wait that long. And so my book is not about letting our workplaces off the hook. It's about saying, hey, we live in a work world that is changing really quickly, but it is not changing quickly enough. And we need to be able to thrive when we're going to work every day in a system that is still built for us to merely survive.
You also say that women encounter headwinds. Do you want to unpack that up?
How much time do we left in this interview? Women encounter so many headwinds. And, Desiree, we've never had a bigger conversation about intersectionality in our workplaces either, right? So women are experiencing lots of different headwinds just based on their own lived experience and how they identify and in the way that they move through their lives. But, there are just so many headwinds against us, right? Like we know that women need to own our message, but there's also academic research that shows that when women speak out, we're sometimes punished. And that's something I talk about in the book about how do we thread that needle. We know that women need to work really hard to get to where they are. And we also, as we discussed earlier, get saddled with more of that unpromotable work. And so I don't have a cure-all for you to just cheerlead yourself against those headwinds. But I really hope that women who read the book, and I hope men will pick up the book and figure out how they can support women at work. What I hope women will understand is, number one, you're not alone. You're not doing it wrong because it feels hard. And number two is this is really about figuring out how to adapt your microculture in your mind, in your office, with yourself, so that you can thrive in a macro culture where, yeah, we do have headwinds, but, Desiree, I'm someone who travels quite a bit between the East Coast and the West Coast. Even when I have headwinds, when I'm coming out to LA, my plane still gets there. I just want to get us there a little bit faster. And I'm hopeful that we will evolve to a society where those headwinds are diminished and eliminated. We're just not there yet. And I can't wait around for that to be the case.
Yeah, and that enthusiasm that you have for this, it's absolutely contagious. I can totally imagine sitting down having, I see the wine. I can imagine having a cocktail with you and just feeling energized because of that. And you're unpacking and kind of breaking down a lot of misconceptions, I feel, because there's these sayings, right? It's the old saying. And right now, one of those old sayings that I'm hearing, or a saying I'm hearing is, well, yeah, a lot of women are leaving the workplace, but they're mothers, right? They had to take care of the kids during the pandemic. Do you want to tell us why that might not be the case?
I'm so glad that we're talking about this. I think that we've had so many conversations about mothers and what they've been through in the last few years, and I'm very sympathetic to that. I am a mother myself. The pandemic shut down my childcare, and I'm self-employed, right? I didn't even really have much of a team at the time to rely on. But there's really important research that comes out of the National Women's Law Center here in DC, which is actually where I'm based, that not only are we missing the mark when we look at that more holistically, we know that a lot of the women who left the workforce aren't mothers. And more importantly, mothers and non-mothers alike, we as women represent the slowest demographic to return to work. And that really troubles me, Desiree, because we already know that only 15% of CEOs in the Fortune 500 are women. And of course, there are so many women who are going to work who are not Fortune 500 CEOs, but that is a bellwether metric that we use to measure women's representation and leadership. And this is not just about our leadership. This is about our long-term earning potential. This is about our ability to fulfill our dreams. And that's what gets me concerned, is women who feel stuck on the sidelines because they did everything right and the workplace is not set up for their success. And so I really hope that the new playbook will empower them to design new goals and to rebound when their plans blow up, because to have your plans blow up is very human.
One of the things that you advocate for is the fact that we are all in this together. You have this battle cry that all women, Black women, women of different ethnicities, religion, etc., all need to rally around. Can you talk about why we should be celebrating?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get there, you hit on something really important, right? It was really important to me as a white woman to not just write another women's leadership book by white women for white women. And so while I can only speak to my own lived experience, I've spent years coaching women with all sorts of different lived experiences and was really intentional about making sure that everything from the stories I told in this book to the research I sourced was from really, truly diverse sources. To your point about what there is to celebrate, we need to celebrate trailblazing women. What concerns me, Desiree, is that we get a lot of media hype about women accomplishing what we should recognize is our bare minimum of representation. So I'll give you an example. Back in 2021, we saw and 2020 as well, we saw some pickups for Black women in particular, scooping up S&P 500 board seats. Huge, tremendous accomplishments for these trailblazing women. However, we also saw headlines saying, record-breaking statistics for Black women on boards. These women are amazing, but their representation was still only 4%. That's not a celebration as a metric. That should be a battle cry. So I want to make sure that we're celebrating these women and really keeping our eyes on the prize about yes, and why is the story not, how did it take this long? Why is the story in the media not, what are we going to do differently? So I celebrate these women, and I want to keep our media and I want to keep our water cooler conversation, if we still have that anymore, thoughtful and curious, not negative. But this is how we get ahead, is when we are able to celebrate success and use it to build for more success, not say, okay, we've checked the box, now we're done.
Yeah. And you have a great example on the wall behind you. The late, great RGB, and just the fact that, okay, if we had equal representation, then why did it take until just very recently for us to have a Black woman on the Supreme Court? Not to mention how few women have been on the Supreme Court throughout history. And we won't even go into some of the other areas of the government.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's great that you bring that up. I'm here based in Washington, D.C., and when the Senate confirmed Ketanji Brown Jackson, who you referenced, and who is our newest Supreme Court justice, and of course our first Black woman to ever take the bench in this country, I actually brought my children to the Supreme Court where there was a block party here in Washington, and they're very young. They're 4 and they're 6. But we canceled all of our plans and just came over on a whim. And I wanted them to understand that they're living through history, and to know that we all have a part to play in really being a part of our day-to-day lives and being a part of our civic discourse. And so my greatest hope, Desiree, is that women feel like they're able to live a life that's aligned with their values and where they're able to make the choices that support them. And that happens in our workplaces, and it happens in the way that we contribute to our public discourse. So yeah, I'm very passionate about that.
I love that you took your kids to that event. You're right. That's going to be with them forever. And that's amazing. Amazing. Now, you have a list. We don't have to go through all 16 because that's a pretty long list. But let's touch on your I Forbid It list. Randi's I Forbid It list. Tell us about that.
Oh my gosh, Desiree. I have the privilege of working with some of the most incredible clients. These are women. Their work inspires me. They're incredible leaders at work and their families and their community. And sometimes the way that they talk just makes me want to pull my hair out of my head. And it's not because they're deficient. It's because, Desiree, as we've talked about a little bit before, we are trained and conditioned and socialized to speak and to comport ourselves in a way that is pleasing to others. And so how I find that manifests is we spend a lot of time hedging our ideas. Or making sure that we're being indirect to be polite. And so I've come up with a list of 16 words that I forbid women to say at work. And I am not going to read them all to you or, share them all with you right now, but I'll just share a few examples. I forbid you to say sorry when you're not actually sorry. I forbid you, Desiree, when you're sharing an idea at work, to phrase it as a question. Desiree, have we thought about this idea? When you ask that in the form of a question, you are literally inviting someone, usually a man, to come, boop, scoop up your idea and get credit for it. Mm-hmm. Also, I just want you to think about, and I just used one as well, where are you using hedge words like just, actually, maybe, perhaps? I mean, there are so many ways that we soften our language. And when we are not direct and confident in our message, people don't take us as seriously. So I hope that you will, Desiree, in the book, there's not just this list of 16 words that I forbid women to say, but there's actually a link to my website where people who buy the book can download a one-pager that you can tack up in your workspace.
Love that.
Wish I could take credit for it. It was the idea of one of my clients. So we can all thank her.
Yes. She'll start getting emails and getting tagged in these strange memes in the future going, what did I do?
Yeah, what did you do?
Okay, you touched on several wonderful stories, and we obviously don't have time to touch on them all. But one of the things I just want to point out is the style of this book has anecdotal stories.
Yes.
You talked about the Taco Bell story, and there's a couple of others. Can you tell us why it is you decided to write your book in this style?
Oh my gosh, there's a few reasons. Number one is that's how I speak. One of my biggest gripes with business books, besides the fact that there are not enough by women for women, is the fact that they're dry and clinical. And I really believe that work and life should be fun. So one, I believe life can be wildly entertaining. And so I tried to write a book that brought as much passion and excitement about that idea as I feel in my life. And number two is it was critical to me, Desiree, to show, not tell. Every single one of the stories I fell in love with. I hope you will as well. I know you've fallen in love with quite a few of them. But it was so important to me to show you and show readers, Desiree, what the new playbook looks like in action. When you are in a stressful situation, when you do mess something up that's really major and really public. And so I hope that the book will humanize this work, will make women feel like we're not alone. Too often, Desiree, this is the final thing I'll say on this point. Too often, I find that women get very paralyzed by shame and by fear because they feel like everyone else around them has it figured out and they don't. And so I really hope that the stories, including my own, which some of them are very tender and vulnerable, that are shared in this book, will inspire women to laugh, to maybe have a glass of wine with a girlfriend, but to make some really big actionable moves in their careers as well.
You're right. I love so many of the stories in there, and reading it as a woman, I can just be like, yeah, I get that. Been there, done that. So it has a lot of that validation you're talking about earlier. Like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Really quick, I know we touched on a few of the stories, but what are one or two other ones that you personally have as favorites?
Absolutely. And so when it comes to some of the favorites that I have in this book, one of the stories that comes to mind just right off the bat is in my Designing Your Goals chapter. So one of the things that I think we as women get really stuck on with our goals, and I talk about 4 ways in my book that women avoid our goals, is we just get overwhelmed by the overwhelm itself. And so we don't do anything because we're convinced that if we're going to do something, it has to be big. Desiree, that's like saying I'm going to go on a diet, but you're just going to cruise through McDonald's today and get one less Big Mac and a big shake. And so one of the stories I tell is about a woman named Dawn who was in a group coaching program that I ran. It was, in the throes of the crisis a few years ago. She had 3 kids in 3 different homeschool situations. And, I asked her, what is it that you really want? And she says, I really wish I could just run. It used to be the thing that kept me sane. And I don't have time for it anymore. So I asked her, Desiree, I said, what's the smallest thing? Because that's one of the tips in my book is about breaking goals down into small pieces. What's the smallest thing you could say yes to? She said, I'm going to set my alarm a few minutes early tomorrow to run. I said, great. What are you going to have to say no to make that yes happen? She said, okay, I'm going to have to not snooze and make sure that my partner makes sure I don't snooze. So partner pushes her out of bed. She runs for 10, 15 minutes. We all applaud her. Desiree, to be honest, didn't really think much of it. Around holiday time, I sent her a gift. About 6 months later, I get an email back from her. Thank you so much for that advice in the program. I just want to let you know that 6 weeks ago, I ran my first marathon. It started with 10 minutes. And it ended with 26.2 miles. And I really believe, Desiree, that women everywhere want to run that marathon. I mean, I personally do not want to run a real marathon, but I have things in my life that are my personal marathon. And I know you have things that are yours. And so I really hope that stories like Dawn's in the book will humanize that doing big things is possible, even when it's scary.
And I love that story. I love your book. And I love your hot pink pumps. Can we talk about that? Tell us why you, Randi, wear those hot pink pumps.
Oh my gosh, my signature hot pink pumps. Desiree, I just love them. I wore them in my headshot years ago. I wear them when I speak, and I'm always amazed how people are so taken by them. Growing up, Desiree, I was the only kid in my friend group who had a working mom. And my mom loved her job. And more than anything, my mom loved getting dressed for her job. She was obsessed with fashion. And I remember sitting on her floor in the mornings before she would go to work and before my bus would take me to school, and we would pick out her clothes. And she was so ahead of her time in understanding that how we comport ourselves down to what we wear is part of our brand. And for me, I celebrate women who want to wear footwear of all kinds. I love, and I tell a great story in my book about me and my sneakers, and how I squared off against a member of the Carolina Panthers, which you'll have to read about in my boundaries chapter. But for me, those pink pumps, they're just fun and irreverent. And candidly, Desiree, they're not something I would have worn as much to work in my corporate life. And so every time I get to put them on in my Something Major life, that's my company, it's just a reminder that I have designed a life and chosen a life where I get to show up as me and kind of honor my mom. I hope to have the fashion sense that she has one day.
Randi, oh my goodness, that's amazing. We could talk all day. We will have to have you come back on the show, but we're running up against the clock. Can you tell everybody where they can go to find out more information about you, maybe even book you as a speaker, because obviously you speak, you give talks, and where people can go to find you on social media and find the book?
Absolutely. A few key resources. Number one, my website, somethingmajorcoaching.com, has all my contact info and tons of free resources that you can download, as well as a link to pick up the book. Number two is you can follow me on social media. So whether that is following me on LinkedIn as Randi Braun, or you can find me on Instagram and TikTok as Something Major Coaching. And then finally, you can find me on Amazon. So please look for Randi Braun, Something Major, the new playbook for women at work. Desiree, it has been such a pleasure to spend this time with you and your listeners. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely, Randi. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on the Books That Make You show. You can find out more information about us on our website. It is booksthatmakeyou.com. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and of course, YouTube. Make sure you ring the bell, subscribe, and never miss a Books That Make You show. And don't forget to sign up for our Webby Award-winning newsletter that is delivered directly to into your inbox once a month with lots of great information about the shows, contests, and all of the bookish events that we do. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.